Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Right School Matters podcast, where we dive deep into the world of K-12 education and tackle some of the big questions and critical topics that help shape our nation's schools. My name is Paul Monteperto, and I have the privilege of serving as your host. And so whether you are thinking of moving, currently considering a different school option, or simply want to better understand what makes a great educational fit for your children and your family, this podcast is here to guide you and to empower you, because we believe that when it comes to our children's future, the right school truly matters. I'd like you to know that this podcast is sponsored by Family to Family Relocation and Real Estate, whose mission is to partner with families and help them discover the best fit educational options for their children when relocating to a new area or searching for a new home. And so today we are excited to welcome our guest, Mrs. Morgan Potts, who serves as the director of the transition program at Woodward Academy in College Park, Georgia. Morgan, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time to join us. This is an exciting time for the school world. As we were talking offline, we're in the heart of admissions season here in the middle of February. Actually, today's Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day to you.
Valentine's.
Thank you. And I know you all are super busy. And so, we've got parents looking at Woodward and your transition program to see if that's a good fit for their kids for next year. And so I appreciate you taking this sliver of time out to join me on this podcast. And so for today's episode, I really would love to dive into the transition program that you have at Woodward Academy to support students with neurodiverse learning challenges and needs. But before we get to that, just take a minute to introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers. Who's Morgan Potts? And tell us a little bit about Woodward Academy.
Yeah, thank you. So I have been working with kids with neurodiverse needs for about 25 years now. I started as a school psychologist in public schools and spent a lot of time in a lot of different kinds of schools, from schools that focus on behavior management to charter schools and everything in between. And then I entered the independent school world about 10 years ago and worked as a learning strategist, and now working at Woodward. It's been a wonderful journey. My heart is in working with these kids, so I will never do anything different. Woodward Academy is an old school. It's 125 years old this year.
Wow.
Yeah. The transition program is also pretty old for a program like ours. It started in the 70s. And so it was around before a lot of the specialty schools were around. So we were on the cutting edge of that. Woodward's a very big school, so people will say it looks like a college campus when they come visit. We have lots of buildings. It's a beautiful campus. We have about 2,700 students altogether. And then the transition program serves students in 2nd through 8th grades, and we have about close to 200 students in this program.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you. It's my understanding that Woodward is one of the largest schools in the country, right? As far as student population?
It is, and people, I think there's a little competition about who can claim being the biggest, and it goes back and forth. But yeah, we're right up there as one of the biggest schools. Yeah.
Sure. And you also have the additional campus in the Johns Creek area.
Correct.
Correct. Yes, and that's K through 8 campus, right?
K through 6.
K through 6. Okay, gotcha. Good. Well, thank you for sharing. And, I certainly encourage folks who are listening or watching to check Woodward Academy out and see if that's something that might be a good fit for you and your family. But as we are taking advantage of this time today, let's talk about that transition program that you said, cutting edge in the 70s. Program that was developed specifically to support students who have some diagnosed learning challenges, what we call neurodiverse learning. And it's been a long time since the 70s. And so the
Right.
program has, I'm sure, evolved and grown tremendously, not just with its population, but with the resources that are utilized and the methodologies that you all use to serve that student population. And so for our viewers and listeners, tell us what is the transition program and who does it serve? What's the typical academic profile of a child that would best be served in that program? And what's the day-to-day? What does that look like for kids that are in the transition program at Woodward Academy?
Yeah. So yes, it's definitely changed a lot over the years. To me, teaching and education is a science. Just like medical science, it's changing and growing all the time. So we want to stay on top of what the newest understandings are. So yeah, it's changed a lot over time. We currently serve, as I said, grades 2 through 8. So our classes are small. So we have about 10 students per class. And through grade 4, we have 2 teachers within each classroom. So very good ratio. And then we continue with the small classes through middle school. The students that we are looking for are students who, because our program is really unique in that our goal is for students to transition back to mainstream at their own school, at the school where they're already going to, so not having to switch schools. So that's a piece of what we're looking at when we're looking at admissions, when we're looking at who's a good fit is, whether looking at this student as a student who will be able to get the remediation, get the strategies, get the interventions, and then be able to be successful as an upper schooler, in a regular classroom. And so that's our ultimate goal. So when we're looking at students, obviously second grade is much different from 8th grade, but that's a consideration across that spectrum. On paper, our criteria is that we serve students with average to above average intellectual functioning and a specific learning disability in reading, writing, or math. So the reason that we have that on paper is because we are an academically focused program.
Right.
So we will have students who also have other diagnoses, kids who are on the autism spectrum or kids who have ADHD, anxiety, other disabilities that might come into play. But what we're looking for is the primary need to be academic need, because that's what our classes are going to focus on. So one of the things that is also unique about Woodward being a specialized program is that we design the class and the experience to be a mirror of the mainstream program. So kids are working on the same level of curriculum as the mainstream students in that supportive environment with the strategies, with the specialized instruction. So we're keeping kids academically and content-wise where they need to be while supporting some of those other skills along the way. Day to day, it's a very typical school day for our transition kids. They're self-contained for academics through 6th grade. So they're going to have all their academic classes with a transition teacher and with transition students, but they have recess and PE and music and art and lunch and all those things with their grade level counterparts. And so there's a lot of interaction with other kids. We do everything we can to just make it feel like just another classroom in the building so that the kids don't feel separated or different. And then in middle school, we do a tailored schedule for each student. So they can take a combination of a transition class for an area of need and a mainstream class in an area that they're excelling in or that they want to push themselves in. I don't know if I answered all your questions, but.
Yeah, no, that's a great picture of the program starting in 2nd grade and going into the middle school. Thank you for sharing that. And so it sounds like, in full transparency, the focus is academic, and that is really to provide the opportunities for the students that have some obstacles that they're trying to get over, or strategies they're trying to develop to overcome some of the learning challenges that they have, so they can access the quality academic programs that Woodward has to offer. And so I think that's an important differentiator because there's a variety of specialized learning programs in the metro Atlanta area across our country. And each of its missions are quite different. For example, I think
Right.
what I'm hearing you say is if a child has some learning challenges, but there are some heavy behavior issues of sorts, that the transition program would not be a good fit for them because of the resources that you have not to be able to support them. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. I will add that we also focus a lot on executive functioning.
Good.
Learning disabilities and executive functioning difficulties tend to go hand in hand a lot of
Sure.
times. And so we're not ignoring that aspect. So we definitely focus on the executive functioning through most of the years. It's incorporated into the structure of the classroom. And so very structured systems and teaching kids how to use those systems. And then as they get older, we have more specific classes and supports just for executive functioning.
Yeah, that's an important point because, like you said, it does come hand in hand. And so, as
Mhm.
you are utilizing the resources available to best support those students in that program, the executive functioning strategies are going to be a part of that because they have to
Right.
learn how to access materials, stay organized, and things of that nature to then move on to their next step in whatever it is that they're learning. And
Right.
so, speaking of, when you think about the instructional strategies, the curriculum, the types of resources used, methodologies. Can you talk a little bit about the specifics around that, whether it be in a phonics program, a reading program, a writing program, or a math program?
Mhm. Mhm. So all of our teachers through fifth grade are trained in Orton Gillingham. And if you don't know what that is, it's a methodology for teaching reading.
Yep.
There are lots of different systems for using Orton Gillingham. So we have all of our teachers trained through, there's the beginning phonics kind of stuff, and then there's morphology, which is what we start to use with a little bit older students. And so all of our teachers, even the teachers who are teaching science or other areas, so they're well aware of those kind of needs. Um, we have just started piloting a new writing program, which I'm really excited about, because, I know teachers get overwhelmed sometimes when we change things up too much. And so we have to be careful about making it work for the kids and the teachers. But, it's just like I said before, like the science continues to move and we have to move with it. And so, um, we're trying out this writing program with 3 of our grade levels, and we're gonna be rolling it out across all of the grades next year. And it's a program that, has a very fun name, SRSD, which is, it's like a very academic-y thing because it was developed by the Peabody School at Vanderbilt, and they pushed it out, and finally some people have put together some resources where you can actually use this program in a classroom without recreating the wheel. And
Sure.
so our teachers are using it, they're loving it, and the kids are making a lot of progress. So a lot of what we do is about iteration and just looking to see where do we need to make any improvements, and let's start looking there. So I think it's a nonstop process of looking at that, but there are some tried and true things that we know. Our teachers will give very explicit instructions, very explicit teaching, which we know from the research is the best way to help kids understand things. So they're not trying to guess at what you're asking them to do. So very explicit, using lots of scaffolding, giving them little supports and teaching them kind of right at that right level where they're challenged but not too frustrated. So a lot of these things are very individualized as opposed to something that you could walk in the classroom and say, oh, there's a program that we can point to. A lot of it is more just about the science of learning and the science of teaching. Um, and for instance, our English teacher in the middle school, he's got a very specific plan for teaching writing across the 2 years. So it's going to start out with, you're going to write your thesis. We're going to talk about that. We're going to do each piece together. And by the end of 8th grade, he's saying, you know where I am, you know your resources, write me a paper and let me know when you need help. So really working on pulling those supports away when they're appropriate is kind of the basis of everything that we do.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of really key ideas, Morgan, that I want to make sure our viewers and listeners latch onto. You mentioned the science behind teaching, and I think that's so important that for people to know about Woodward and certainly other schools out there that are willing to continue to learn
Mm-hmm.
about how the science of learning is changing and the new discoveries that we are making, and then how we can capture that and bring that into a second grade classroom, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the alternative, and that is you just continue to do what you've always done.
Right.
And so that is, I applaud those efforts of Woodward. The other word you mentioned was individualized.
Mm-hmm.
That is important to know, because we know in a classroom of 12, 15, 25, whatever it is, that each one of those kids sitting there is different. And he or she has different learning needs. They have a different background. They're coming with different experiences. And so as teachers build relationships with the students in those
Mm-hmm.
classrooms, to be able to individualize their needs and their supports is critical, especially for children who have a neurodiverse learning diagnosis. And so I appreciate you sharing that. I would love to ask you this question for parents out there who have neurodiverse children, whether it's they've had them for a while, or they've known of this for a while and they're currently seeking support and the kids are benefiting where they are, or children that are newly diagnosed and it's a new journey for a family, or really just the general public to better understand what neurodiversity is. And so could you share maybe two things that you believe would be critical for people to understand what it means to teach neurodiverse students in a classroom?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing that I think is important is that these kids are very capable of doing great things, and that having dyslexia or other learning disabilities should not ever prevent them from being allowed to participate in something. That's really important to me. Sometimes they need accommodations in order to participate, but that, for example, a student with dyslexia can end up taking AP literature. We need to see that as an option. It's not an option for everybody, whether they have a disability or not, but that shouldn't be a deciding factor. Um, and then the second thing I would say is just be patient with yourself as a parent, because it is a process, and it's a lifelong process, and parents are almost always doing everything they can and feeling there's a lot of parent guilt out there. And so, I try to, dampen that guilt whenever I can, that, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And, you know, if a student is 3 years behind in reading, we're not going to fix that in 1 year.
Right.
That's going to it's a process. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take some caring and some nurturing and some supports. We'll get there. But I have the privilege of seeing kids start out young, where we're like, oh, I don't know if this kid's ever going to be able to read. I mean, we're just working so hard. And then they're going off to college,
Right.
and they're doing great. So it works out, that just be patient and know that it's a process.
That's good. That's great advice for parents, for sure. The patience is oftentimes the hardest thing,
Mhm.
especially in the beginning, because you just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And it can sometimes be scary, because oftentimes if, students are in a, what we would call a general ed school setting, and they are very, very upset or sad or be frustrated because they are struggling, and nobody has figured out how to best support them. They're
Mhm.
coming to you, a transition program or another specialized learning program, defeated. And so there's all that emotional weight that is coming with them, and of course the parents as well. And so, you mentioned, that beginning part being hard, but once they learn that they're not the only person who learns this way, and that you can actually learn how to read if you're using different strategies, that smile comes back and they find confidence, and then ultimately they can go off to college, just like you said. And so it is a privilege for you to be able to have that seat and watch that journey as those
Yeah.
kids move through.
And then, can I add one more thing?
Sure.
So being in the world of special education, students with learning needs, that kind of stuff, one of the things that I would caution is that there is lots and lots and lots of bad information out there in the world. And so to take it all with a critical lens, because there are, especially about public schools, I'm working in an independent school. My kids go here. So, I'm obviously all in, but I also have a special place in my heart for public school. I went to public school and I was a school psychologist. And, there's a lot of information out there that can sound like, they're out to get you as parents. And for the most part, they're not. Take care of yourself, but also, find some credible resources to get information from, and, be careful. There's some bad programs out there.
There are, and I appreciate you saying that. I think ultimately it comes down to being an advocate for your child and being involved, and knowing no matter what school curb you're dropping your child off at in the morning, who are they? What's their mission? What are they trying to accomplish? Who's the teacher in front of your children, and staying involved? And if your child has some learning needs, does the school have the resources to adequately meet them?
Right.
And I think that ultimately comes down to it. And unfortunately, sometimes schools think they do, but they don't. You mentioned public school. Sometimes the public schools have the most resources to meet kids with specialized learning needs, gifted students, and all of those types of things. So it really comes down to what's the best fit for not just the child, but for the family as well. And so, and that's, in my role as an educational consultant, these are the conversations I'm having with families every day. You've heard this, you've seen that rating online, and you've heard this review and all that. But what it boils down to is, who is your child? What programs do they have to serve him or her? And then do the values and programs align with who you are as a family? And so those are some of the more important questions to ask. But I appreciate you sharing that, because there is a lot of bad information out there. And, unfortunately, with the internet today, it's much more easily accessible. And so we have to be careful with what we're reading and what we're consuming, and seek out the professionals who know how to evaluate that and help guide families, in the right way, the right direction. As we're coming to the end of our conversation, Morgan, I'd like to shift gears away from the education piece and into the community. Woodward Academy, the main campus, is located in College Park, Georgia, which is in the South Atlanta area. And so I know there's a lot of buzz and excitement in that area with different activities and things to do. And so you may not live there, but you work there each and every day. And so I'd love for you to share maybe a little bit about that College Park, South Atlanta area. So what are some good activities for people to get involved in, things to do? I know it's close to the airport, and maybe a favorite restaurant or two, because I'm a foodie and I always like to learn about new places to eat.
Okay, great. Yeah. College Park is really cute. It's like this little southern town, sort of, like in the middle of the big city, and it is still part of the big city. We've got a MARTA station that's right down the road. Most of our families actually don't live around here, because it tends to be a commuter school, so we have families from all over the Atlanta area, and we have, I think, the second largest bus system in Georgia. So we have a lot of buses. We bus kids take MARTA. But we do have a contingency of families who live down here. Most of what's around here is restaurants. So you'll be happy to hear. So as far as things to do, Brake Pad is my favorite, and that's partly because you can walk there from campus, so
Very cool. Very cool. Convenient.
there really easily. There's also a little coffee. It's just a drive-through coffee place called Corner Coffee, and it's really good. But there are lots of other places like, there's like Famous Chicken and Waffles. There's Hattie Mae's Barbecue.
Yeah.
It's also real close to Hapeville. So I don't know if you're familiar with Hapeville, but Hapeville's just like another little small town over. And there are tons of restaurants and stuff there. There's a new brewery that just opened up there. I would say more of the like activity stuff that I know of is in Hapeville, but it's like a mile down the road. So
Right.
yeah, it's a great place.
Yeah, that's good. Like I said, it's a condensed area with buzzing with excitement. And I think you described it well. A small town in the middle of the big city
Yeah,
is what it feels like. And so thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
And so before we part, Morgan, any last words for our viewers and listeners?
I was trying to think of what I would say about that. I think I'll just go back to what I was saying before about, I think that education is a science, and our understanding of students with learning disabilities and learning differences is changing every day. I read a new article every day that's something, new that they have discovered and figured out. And, everybody's got a different brain, right? So we all have strengths and weaknesses, and we just work with what we have and build on our strengths and support our weaknesses.
There you have it. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you.
Morgan Potts from Woodward Academy, again, director of the Transition Program, which serves students in grades 2 through 8 with supporting their learning needs through a specialized learning program. And so thank you, Morgan. I appreciate you being with us today. Folks, if you are looking for support in the education industry, if you're looking for a new opportunity, if you're moving to the area, family-to-family relocation and real estate is here to support your school finding needs and your real estate needs as well. And so with that said, thank you for joining us, and God bless.